Sriyad Gadadhara Sivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining. Any quick reflections from yesterday's reading? Anyone? Do you all remember where we left? You all can hear me?
Okay. Trying to remember.
See, this is the memory test. Matta smriti jnanam apannam cha. From me comes remembrance, forgetfulness, and knowledge. So we,
right? Or do the cops come multiple times?
Yeah, it's Berkeley Temple we are discussing. At Berkeley Temple. Berkeley Temple. Samarth, you're bothering. Come here, come for reading.
I'm studying.
Studying, we're also studying. Let's study together.
I'm studying homework.
We are also doing homework only.
No, I'm studying school studies.
We are also doing the same thing. Okay, go ahead. So Berkeley Temple, as far as if I remember, the because was police. That's the one? Police came?
No, I think we're a lot further down, aren't we?
No, this is what it says. Police officers and continue arguing, then devotees continued content that they were not using building as residence and they left. And half hour he lost. Then there's a conference. You remember devotees gathered and Prabhupada had a conversation and the reporters, they prepared they took the questions from the reporters and they asked Prabhupada. Yeah, I think this is the one. The common opposition to the Hare Krishna movement and how the airports, people are bothering in this airports, and Prabhupada responded to this. Then all the reporters laughed the way conversation is going on. Then they asked, and what will happen after you die? He said, I'm never going to die. So he was confident that he'll remain alive through his books, through his teachings, through the temples. Social workers, he also said, we are all the best of the social workers, and we are making first-class people in the society. Is there any better social worker than us? Okay, is that right? This is what we read yesterday. Okay, when a reporter asked about the political effects of the Hare Krishna movement, Prabhupada said, if this God consciousness is spread, then everyone will be brilliantly qualified. Recalling a discussion from his morning walk on the campus of the University of California, Berkeley, he added, the students are studying psychology, but the result is that the falling down from the tower in disappointment. And they have protected with the glass, right? The university. Bahulaso explained further that Prabhupada meant in the bell tower on the Berkeley campus, students in the 60s would jump from the tower to kill themselves. So they put glass there to stop the students from jumping. So Prabhupada was explaining that this is their education, that after getting their education, they have to commit suicide. Brahmananda, Srila Prabhupada, one pressman wanted to know, what is this Rath Yatra festival? Why is it going on over here in the Western world? Prabhupada, if God is the proprietor of everything, he is also the proprietor of the Western world. Is there in dispute? If you say God is the proprietor of the Western world, what is wrong there? So if the Western world has forgotten God and he comes to remind them, what is wrong? Reporter, but what is the purpose of the large carts and other things used? Prabhupada, large cart means God is very great. It requires very great car. The devotees laughed. Why should he go on small car? Prabhupada continued speaking until all questions were answered. Now, whatever the reporters would write was up to them. But Prabhupada had used the occasion for glorifying Lord Krishna and explaining his movement, whether press conference, public festival, private conversation, or translating, his purpose was the same. So reporters have come to Berkeley temple, and this is going on. Very nice conversation was going on. Now the question is asked, if about effects of Hare Krishna, political effects of the Hare Krishna movement. Prabhupada said, if this God consciousness spread, then everyone will be brilliantly qualified. So people will not, children are studying psychology, but they're falling from the tower. What kind of education it is? That's why you put the glasses to protect them. Bala Prabhu explained that how a student gets frustrated and commits suicide. So Brahman Prabhu asked, Maharaj said, and the reporter is asking that why we are conducting. Prabhupada said, well, God is the proprietor of all the worlds. So he's the proprietor of Western world also. What's wrong? Then why you need a big cart? So because he's great, you need the bigger cart. So you have to present him very pompous, like very large, elaborate. When ordinary human being goes, with so much of elaborate arrangement is done. When God comes, why not this big cart he should be making? So Prabhupada gave his answer. He know that many times the reporters, they manipulate and they write. Prabhupada said, at least we did our preaching work, and hope that, let rest is them, how they will do. AJ?
Where's the mute? Oh, come on. Found it. I couldn't find I was unmuted. I couldn't find the mute button, then I muted myself. So during a morning walk on the Berkeley campus, Prabhupada pronounced that nuclear war was inevitable. Devotees had brought up the topic of proliferation of atomic weapons. Russia has so many weapons. China has so many weapons. The United States has so much. Prabhupada, everyone now, India also. Devotee. They're all afraid of using them. Prabhupada, they must use it. That is nature's arrangement. That you all die. That is nature's arrangement. Tamal Krishna Goswami. When someone gets some power, he wants to try it out. Just like there was that demon, Lord Shiva gave him power so that anyone's head he touched would fall off. Prabhupada. Just because there are so many... Yes, just like in your country, there are so many cars, so that a poor man like me has car always. Not an inch move on leg. But because there are so many cars, naturally they must be used. Similarly, there are so many weapons now that must be used. That is the natural sequence. They must use it. Bahosva, that is why they have wars, just to use up the weapons. Prabhupada, oh yes. Devotee, the only difficulty is that for one person to use the atomic weapon, that means it would be the entire waste of mankind. So everyone is afraid of using the ultimate. Prabhupada. Anyway, they must be used. There's no doubt about it. Therefore, we can say there will be war. This is no astrology. It is a natural conclusion. Devotee, that will be total destruction. Prabhupada. Well, total or partial, that we shall see, but they must be used. Devotee, under the threat of nuclear war, wouldn't Krishna consciousness be more easy to spread? Prabhupada, no, threat is already there, but they are such fools that they are not afraid of the threat. Threat is already there. Everyone will die. That is the problem. But who is caring for this? They are avoiding this. They cannot take any anti-measures. Yadubara. So it will take a war to bring them to their senses a bit. Prabhupada. No, war is already going on, but they are so senseless that they will not come to this. They are so rascal. Therefore, they are described as mudha, all rascals. Tamala Krishna. It is very hard to preach to these fools, Prabhupada. Prabhupada. No, chant Hare Krishna. That will be sufficient. Srila Prabhupada had rarely been so conclusive about nuclear war. Earlier in the year, on a walk in Mayapur, he had discussed how there would be a World War III, and that talk had become a sensation throughout ISKCON. But before, he had always offered an alternative. If the people of the world could take to Krishna consciousness, then the cumulative karma could be reversed. But now he said it was inevitable. So the devotees in Prabhupada are walking down the beach, and they're talking about nuclear weapons and how everybody has nuclear weapons now, and or sorry, not at the beach, at Berkeley. And Prabhupada says, you know what? Everybody has them. Russia has them. China has them. India has them. But you know, there's gonna be a nuclear war. It's inevitable. It's gonna happen. And Prabhupada says, not only that, they have to use it. That's how nature is set up. He says, everybody's gonna die. That's life. That's how it works. And Tamal Krishna, you know, says when you get power, you want to try it out. And then he kind of relays the story of when Lord Shiva gave that guy the power to blow up anybody's head, which is a fun story.
Yeah.
Right.
What is, anyone remembers the name?
I don't remember the name. I just remember the story. Yeah.
What surah?
Right. And that's the one where he says to Shiva, I want a boon. Right. He says, I want this boon where anybody who I touch, their head will explode. And so next thing you know, he gets the power, he tries it out, and then he immediately starts chasing Shiva, trying to blow up Shiva's head. And then who was it, Vishnu or Krishna? Vishnu or I can't remember if it was
Vishnu only. Vishnu
Yeah.
only. Vishnu, Krishna, non different.
yeah.
Only comes.
He says, hey man, that's not a real power. Touch your own head and try it out. But so Tamal Krishna, you know, talks about that story, and Prabhupada says that, you know, everybody has cars in this country. So, you know, even poor people have cars. So nobody walks on legs because you have so many cars, everybody has to use cars. So since you have so many weapons, people have to use the weapons. That's just how it works. And, you know, one of the devotees says, yeah, that's why we have wars, just to use up the weapons. And a devotee says, you know, the problem is, well, not the problem, the difficulty is that if anybody uses an atomic weapon, everything's gone, right? It's the ultimate. And Prabhupada says, yeah, well, they got to be used anyway. There's no doubt about it. There's going to be a war. And it's not even, you know, he says it's not astrology. He's not guessing. It's just a natural conclusion. You have all these weapons. Someone's going to use the weapons. And the devotee says, well, that's the end of it. That's total destruction. He says, partial, total, we'll have to see about that, but they're going to be used. And somebody says, well, you know what? Wouldn't the idea that a nuclear war might happen, wouldn't that help bring people to Krishna consciousness? Because they know they you know, they'll be attracted to the next step, you know, to an answer like Krishna consciousness. And Prabhupada says, well, that threat of war is always here. There's wars going on all the time, and people, you know, people aren't afraid of it. So, you know, well, hold on, what's he say that? He says, yeah, he says, everybody's senseless. There's always wars going on. Everybody's a rascal. He says they're all rascals. And Tamal Krishna goes, he's like, no, it's so hard to preach to these fools because they're so ignorant. And Prabhupada says, you know, just chant Hare Krishna and that's all you need to do, right? And in the past, Prabhupada had talked about how, you know, World War III was bound to happen, how it was inevitable. And but he always said, you know, he always tempered it with if you know, it wasn't inevitable as much as if people took the Krishna consciousness, they could reverse the course and the war would be avoidable. But in this talk, he was very definitive that he said, nope, war is going to happen no matter what. Nuclear weapons are going to happen, and that's going to be it. So.
It's the fact if ISKCON would not have been there, more war would have been happened. And see, all the weapons as purpose is being used. You know, for us, this weapon is like a very new thing, new concept. We cannot think about seeing a gun, and you know, people are carrying a gun. But it's like we can see that everywhere. You know, in America, people have, and the terrorist has. It's like become a culture, and we accept it. Everybody's making money out of the selling. No more grains, selling weapons and fighter flights. And that's the way countries are making their economy, and we are part of it. Okay. Sorry for that. Vijan and Prabhu, please read.
Srila Prabhupada had rarely, sorry. While in Berkeley, Srila Prabhupada received a visit from Yogi Bhajan, founder of H Foundation, Swami Siddhananda, president of Divine Life Society, and Jain leader Swami Sushil Muni, president of World Fellowship of Religion. Swami Sushil wore a white turban and across his mouth a white mask in the tradition of the non-violent Jains who tried to avoid killing even airborne microbes. Yogi Bhajan, dressed in typical Sikh fashion of white turban and white loose-fitting garments, was accompanied by a few of his Western disciples, similarly attired. Visits from various Swamis and Yogis were not uncommon for Srila Prabhupada. Even when he did not agree with a particular philosophy, he was always the cordial host, pleasantly receiving guests in his simple quarters. In Hawaii, Yogi Bhajan had also visited Srila Prabhupada to invite him to his Unity of Man conference, which many sadhus were already scheduled to attend. Srila Prabhupada had spoken sternly, pointing out that simply gathering people at a meeting was not unity. Real unity could be achieved only if the participants of the meeting agreed to accept the authorized signs of God in the revealed scriptures. Now they had come to invite him to a second Unity of Man conference. Swami Sushil and Swami Siddhananda were particularly enthusiastic in praising Srila Prabhupada and his ISKCON. Your movement is something different, said Swami Siddhananda. It's all over the world, and you have so many thousands of people all over the world. We can't describe it. It's so amazing. And in this age, how wonderfully it has been done. Without God's mercy, nothing could have been done. That 6 lakhs of magazines have come out and been distributed in 1 month. It's amazing. Swami Sushil added, you have established the same principles without any change here in a modern way. In Bengal, without your ashrama, we could not have done anything. When we know there is an ashrama of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we don't need to worry about anything, where to stay. What strikes me is that you don't compromise anywhere. They mentioned the horrible sin of cow slaughter, and Srila Prabhupada told how this movement was protecting cows in New Vrindavan. When Swami Sushil asked how Prabhupada interested the young people in God, Prabhupada gave the example that the most popular sweet shop in Delhi was the one where everything was made with pure ghee. If the thing is good, Prabhupada said, then there won't be a shortage of customers. He further pointed out that his teaching were based purely on Bhagavad Gita surrendered to Krishna. When Swami Sushil asked how Prabhupada got his followers to take shelter of Krishna, Prabhupada replied, it's God who did it. God says, Mamekam Sharanam Vraja. So that is our duty, just to take shelter of him. Lord Chaitanya says, Yare Deka Tare Kaha Krishna Upadesha. That is, whoever you meet, just preach the teachings of Krishna as in the Bhagavad Gita. I don't have any Upadesha. It's just Krishna's Upadesha. We are all foolish. We can't have any Upadesha. So what are the teachings of Krishna? We just keep on saying them. Krishna says, do like that, and that's what we do. So this is our secret. I do this, and that's what I teach to all these people. I'm totally against manufactured religion. Yavam parampara praptam, just as Krishna says. So when Prabhupada was in Berkeley, Prabhupada received a visit from Yogi Bhajan, who was the founder of the H Foundation, and Swami Siddhananda was the president of the Divine Life Society and also a Jain leader. Swami Sushil Muni was the president of World Fellowship of Religion. So here Swami Sushil, he had a white turban across his mouth and a white mask in a tradition of the non-violent Jains who avoid killing even airborne microbes. And Yogi Bhajan was dressed in a typical Sikh fashion of white turban and loose-fitting garments, and he was accompanied by his Western disciples, who were attired similarly. And so, such kind of visits, like various Swamis and Yogis, are not uncommon for Srila Prabhupada. So, even Prabhupada did not agree with a particular philosophy. He always received all the guests cordially in his simple quarters. And in Hawaii, Yogi Bhajan had also visited Srila Prabhupada to invite him to his Unity of Man conference, which many sadhus were scheduled to attend. But Prabhupada had spoken sternly that simply gathering people at a meeting was not a unity, and a real unity could be achieved only if the meeting participants agreed to accept the authorized signs of God, which is mentioned in the scriptures. And now they come to invite him for the second Unity of Man conference. So Swami Shushil and Swami Siddhananda were enthusiastic in praising Srila Prabhupada and his ISKCON. So they mentioned like your movement is something different, said Swami Siddhananda. It's all over the world, and there are thousands of people all over the world, and it cannot be described. It's so amazing, and in this age, how wonderfully it has been done. So, and they also mentioned that without God's mercy, nothing would have been done. And this 6 lakh magazines going out and distributed in 1 month, it's really amazing. And Swami Shushil added that you had established the same principles without any change here in the modern way. And he mentioned that in Bengal, without your ashrama, we could not have done anything. And they mentioned that if they came to know the ashram of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they don't need to worry about anything, where to stay. And they emphasize that what strikes them is that they don't compromise anywhere. And also they mentioned that the horrible sin of cow slaughter, and Prabhupada told them like how the ISKCON is protecting cows in New Vrindavan. And when Swami Shushil asked how Prabhupada interested the young people in God, and Prabhupada gave the example of a sweet shop in Delhi, which was manufacturing sweets only from pure ghee. So he mentioned that if the things are good and there will not be any shortage of customers. So similarly, he mentioned that we are following the teachings which is purely based on Bhagavad Gita, surrender to Krishna. And also Swami Shushil asked Prabhupada how he got his followers to take shelter of Krishna. Prabhupada replied that it's God who did it. So he also mentioned like God has said like Mamekam Sharanam Vraja. So that is our duty. So we just need to take shelter of him. Also Lord Chaitanya says Yare Deka Tare Kaha Krishna Upadesha. So as Chaitanya says, like whomsoever we meet, like we just need to preach the teachings of Krishna as mentioned in Bhagavad Gita. And Prabhupada does not have his own instructions. It's all of them are Krishna's instructions. And he mentioned that we are all foolish and we cannot have any Upadesha. So what are the teachings from Krishna? We just keep on saying them. And when Krishna mentioned us says to do like that, and that's what we do. So that is our secret. And he mentioned that he did the same, and that's what he want to teach all these people. But he also mentioned that he is totally against the religion which is manufactured, and he said that it should be evam parampara praptam as mentioned by Krishna.
Thank you. Sarika,
In reply to Swami Sushil's question of how people could be brought together, Prabhupada quoted a verse from Srimad Bhagavatam that lists many races of the world and explains that all of them can be purified by taking shelter of Krishna's pure devotee. Prabhupada's guest again invited him to their conference, and Swami Sushil added, "We were very glad to meet you yesterday. We would like to call you sometime in our meetings of Yoga Dharma." "Will come," said Prabhupada. "What about your fellowship?" "It's called World Fellowship of Religion," said Swami Chidananda. "Yogiji has made this Unity of Man conference." "But we invited him," said Yogi Bhajan, referring to the previous invitation. Swami Chidananda, "But now you are having the second one?" Yogi Bhajan, "Yes, the second meeting is in Mexico. We will call him then as well." Srila Prabhupada smiled and said, "I told you before, there is not going to be any unity." This candid remark made them laugh. "You say," said Swami Chidananda, remembering Prabhupada's analysis that until everyone is God-minded, until then, when God will desire, said Yogi Bhajan, then everyone will become God-minded. What's the great deal about it? God himself says, said Srila Prabhupada, Dukhalayam Ashashvatam, there is suffering. You cannot stay in this world, you have to live. The main problem is birth, old age, disease, and death. So we are not anxious to add these things here, but these are the real problems. "What can we do about birth, old age, disease, and death?" asked Swami Chidananda. Srila Prabhupada continued preaching Bhagavad Gita. Without overtly disagreeing, Prabhupada's guest inquired and listened with respect, considering him a great spiritual leader, potent in spreading Hindu Dharma. He is great. He is great, said Yogi Bhajana. That's what I want to learn. How he can do that. The conversation the conversation turned, and Prabhupada mentioned that Yogi Bhajan was from the Sikh community, which is famous for its brave fighters. When the British people were defeated, said Srila Prabhupada, it was by the Sikh people. I have seen it. It is due to the Sikhs only. The Sikhs are Kshatriyas. Some of them are Brahmanas, Brahman Kshatriyas. Swami's. So in reply to Swami Sushil's question, like he asked like how people can be brought together, Srila Prabhupada quoted a verse from Srimad Bhagavatam, and then which says that all of them, people from different religions, different races, can all be purified just by taking shelter of Krishna's pure devotee. Then all Prabhupada's guests again invited him to their conference. And then Sushil said that they were all very glad to meet Srila Prabhupada that day. And then they also invited Srila Prabhupada to their meeting of Yoga Dharma. And Prabhupada says that he would attend. And then he asked, what about the fellowship? And then Swami Chidananda says it's called World Fellowship of Religion. And Yogi Ji made this Unity of Man conference. And then Yogi Bhajan, he says that they invited Prabhupada, and then he showed the previous invitation. And Swami Chidananda says, but now this is the second one, which is to be held in Mexico. And Srila Prabhupada smiled when he heard that and said that there is not going to be any unity. And then Swami Chidananda, he was remembering Srila Prabhupada's previous analysis, and then says that when God will desire, then everyone will become God-minded. So what is so great deal about it? Srila Prabhupada says God Himself says that this world is dukhalema shashvatam. There is suffering, and then we cannot stay in this world forever. One day everybody has to leave. The main problems of this in this world are birth, old age, disease, and death. So these are the real problems. So we are not very anxious to adjust these things, but these are the real problems. And then Swami Chidananda asked, like, what about birth? What is this? What about birth, old age, disease, and death? And then Srila Prabhupada continued preaching Bhagavad Gita. And then when Srila Prabhupada continued preaching, all the guests, they did not disagree with Srila Prabhupada overly, but they inquired and listened with great respect. And they considered Srila Prabhupada as a great spiritual leader who was potent enough to spread this Hindu Dharma. And then Yogi Bhajan, he comments saying that he's great, Srila Prabhupada is great. That's what I want to learn. How can he do that? He wanted to learn that from Srila Prabhupada. And then the topic changed, and Prabhupada mentioned that the Yogi Bhajan was from the Sikh community, which is famous for its brave fighters. So when the British were defeated, Prabhupada said it was by the Sikh people. It is due to Sikhs only. Sikhs are Kshatriyas. Some of them are Brahmanas, so they are Brahman Kshatriyas. So it's only me over today.
You, okay. You read your wife's part also then. Just kidding. Second, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. The conversation turned and Prabhupada mentioned that Yogi Bhajan was from the Sikh community, which is famous for its brave fighters. So is it from Prabhupada, Prabhu? Or?
That's okay, you can read from the top.
The conversation turned and Prabhupada mentioned that Yogi Bhajan was from the Sikh community, which is famous for its brave fighters. When the British people were defeated, said Srila Prabhupada, it was by the Sikh people. I have seen it. It is due to the Sikhs only. The Sikhs are Kshatriyas. Some of them are Brahmanas, Brahmana Kshatriyas. Swami Sushil. Yes, I said to some of my students that you go to Prabhupada Ji and he will make you Brahmana Kshatriyas. Prabhupada, yes, let us cooperate like that. You take the work of Kshatriyas and we take the work of Brahmanas. For Brahmanas, we need brain, and for Kshatriyas, we need strength. As they spoke about non-violence, Srila Prabhupada argued that if one does not become God conscious, then he will undoubtedly be committing himsa or violence. Yogi Bhajan. Yes, when they come to their senses, then they remember God. Prabhupada laughing. Here in the West, there is only himsa, nothing else. Prabhupada guests laughed with him. Afterward, they took some photographs. Srila Prabhupada invited them, along with some of his disciples, to sit and take Krishna Prasadam together. Srila Prabhupada requested his guests to attend the San Francisco Rath Yatra to be held the next day, and they agreed. July 20, 1975. This was not only the largest ISKCON Rath Yatra ever, but also the largest gathering of devotees to date, larger even than the international gathering at Mayapur earlier that year. Preparations at the festival site had expanded to include prasadam booths, DT paraphernalia displays, souvenirs, and Prabhupada's books. Thousands joined the more than 800 devotees in the procession through Golden Gate Park. Because the builders of the carts had decided to make steel wheels instead of the usual wooden ones, difficulty arose. Srila Prabhupada had warned them, "This is your American disease, always changing. Do not change the old design," but they had already done it. Riding in Subhadra's cart, which had wooden wheels, Srila Prabhupada experienced no personal inconvenience. The other two carts, however, did not fare so well. They began to vibrate so severely that support beams had to be added to the spokes during the procession. Soon the big wheels became misshapen, and they creaked and rattled as though about to collapse. But somehow, after much difficulty, all three carts completed the course. In the midst of the Rath Yatra activities, one of the devotees asked Srila Prabhupada if he had ever attended the Rath Yatra festival in Jagannath Puri. No, Prabhupada replied, "I was having my own Rath Yatra." So here, Prabhupada is having a conversation, continuing the conversation with Yogi Bhajan, and he says that the Sikhs are Kshatriyas, and they were one of the main reasons why the British people were defeated, and some of them are Brahmanas and some of them are Brahmana Kshatriyas. And Swami Sushil says that he asked some of his students to go to Prabhupada ji and that he will make them Brahmana Kshatriyas. And Prabhupada says, yes, let's cooperate. You can take the work of Kshatriyas and we will take the work of Brahmanas. Because Brahmanas need brain and Kshatriyas need strength. And when they spoke about non-violence, Prabhupada mentioned that if we don't become God conscious, then we will all be committing himsa or violence. And Yogi Bhajan says when they come to their senses, then they will remember God. And Prabhupada comments that here in the West there is only himsa. And after that, they all had prasadam. And Prabhupada requested his guests to attend the San Francisco Rath Yatra, which was the next day, and they agreed. And this Rath Yatra was one of the biggest Rath Yatra ever, and there were close to 800 devotees who gathered. It was more than the gathering at Mayapur for Gaur Purnima that year. And at the festival site this time they had prasadam booths, deity paraphernalia displays, Prabhupada's books, and thousand visitors joined the 800 devotees when they went through the Golden Gate Park. And this time the builders used steel wheels for two of those carts instead of wooden wheels, and there were some difficulties because of that. And Prabhupada had warned them that this is the American disease, you always want to change, but you should not change the old design. And Subhadra's cart was still having the wooden wheels, and Prabhupada did not have any inconvenience while sitting in that cart. Whereas the other two carts, they were having difficulties. They had to make some repairs during the procession, and somehow after much difficulty they completed the course. And one of the devotees asked Prabhupada if he had ever attended the Puri Rath Yatra. Prabhupada said no, that he was having his own Rath Yatra as a child.
Very well, very nice. For Rath Yatra, always there'll be some challenge, never going to be so smooth. In Puri, they make new chariots, it goes smooth, certainly. But still, Jagannath makes a lot of activities. Rath Yatra is most of the time never smooth. Many times in anxiety. Last year, we worked so much, and our Jagannath chariots in Philadelphia, that, what do you call, covering, yeah, it all fell, collapsed. Luckily, nothing happened to anyone. Year before last also, we had a major issue. A few years back, we had a very major issue. It's been always, Rath Yatra has not been so very easy always.
I was on the cart when that happened.
Oh, you're in that cart, huh? How is it?
No one was there. Luckily, there were just some prasadam there, but it dropped fast. The wire snapped and it dropped.
It is dangerous. Somebody they would have been dead, I think. No?
Injured, but I think it snapped. It was heavy.
You're lucky. You have personal experience now. Okay. Should we move to the next chapter? Or then later everybody can share the reflections? Gaurang is, Bastev is begun. Click it, Bastev. So we're beginning chapter 48. So yeah, 47. Am I right? Is it 47? Yeah. Preaching to America, part 2. Okay, who is going to read now? Prasanthi?
Preaching to America, Part 2, Los Angeles, July 22, 1975. More than 3 weeks had passed since Prabhupada had given the order for the BBT to produce 17 books in 2 months. Now, Rameshwara and Radha Vallabha reported that work was going on around the clock in all departments and that devotees were determined to meet their deadlines. Most press workers attended Mangala Aarti at 4:30 a.m., chanted their prescribed rounds of japa, and worked all day until late at night, sometimes taking only one meal. Additional editors, painters, photographers, indexers, typists, proofreaders, and layout men had been called in from other ISKCON departments. Everyone was cooperating to fulfill Srila Prabhupada's desire. It was as though nothing else existed except the task before them. Kingsport Press, one of the largest printers in the country, had taken the job of printing, agreeing to push back all other assignments to free their presses and bindery for work 24 hours a day until all 17 volumes were printed. A paper company in New York had agreed to supply paper at affordable terms to meet all the deadlines. The BBT top photographer was in India photographing places of Chaitanya Leela, especially in Bengal and Orissa. Srila Prabhupada freely gave his time to the artists and Bengali editors, answering their questions. Several times a day, his disciples would come to him about the exact use of Sanskrit and Bengali words. This was not merely a matter of lingual scholarship, but since each word had to be translated in light of the previous acharyas' explanations and Prabhupada's own Krishna conscious realization. Prabhupada had cautioned disciple editors not to change but to ask. The artists had their usual questions about how things should look according to Srila Prabhupada's transcendental vision, in their desire to have the paintings completely accurate. They were greedy to ask him almost endless questions. Prabhupada had said the transcendental paintings of his disciples were windows to the spiritual world. The artists didn't want their imaginations to obscure the view. One day, Rameshwara came into Srila Prabhupada's room carrying canvases by one of the artists whose proficiency the most experienced artist questioned. The artist in question, Gauri Devi Dasi, was a book distributor with artistic talent pressed into emergency service for the book production marathon. Rameshwara showed Srila Prabhupada her painting of Gundicha temple. Prabhupada's verdict, "Oh, this is very nice." One of the senior artists was present and pointed out several technical errors, but Prabhupada replied, "A blind uncle is better than none." Besides, he said the painting showed a devotional spirit the readers of the book would appreciate. Due to Srila Prabhupada's presence in Los Angeles, the book production marathon intensified. Even without attending Prabhupada's morning walks or classes or evening readings in the garden, the press workers felt ecstasy. All day they worked at what Prabhupada most wanted, and to take time off to go see him they reasoned would be selfish. Giving all their energy for Krishna, they felt blissful. So it's been
This will be an amazing incident, and it's a miracle. They will finish Chaitanya Charitamrita in 2 months in printing. Yeah, just go ahead.
so 3 weeks had passed since Prabhupada ordered his disciples to print the 17 books of Chaitanya for Chaitanya Charitamrita. And now Rameshwara and Radha Vallabha reported that work was going on around the clock, and they were even attending the Mangalarti at 4:30, and sometimes they are only having they are finishing their japa rounds and then they start the marathon. Sometimes they only take one meal a day. Many additional people are also asked to help, and from other ISKCON departments they came, like editors, painters, photographers, indexers, typists, proofreaders, many people. And then they all are cooperating for Prabhupada's desire, and nothing else mattered to them than his instruction. Kingsport Press also, um, uh, one of the largest printers in the country, also cooperated with this activity, and a paper company also supplied paper. The press was working 24 hours. People were working around the clock, and a photographer was working in India to take photographs in Bengal and Orissa. And the questions always were coming into Prabhupada all the time for this exact use of Sanskrit and Bengali words. And they don't want to, Prabhupada already gave instruction to them that they should ask each and every question and not interpret according to their mind. So they always come up with questions, and Prabhupada answered them. And artists also have a lot of questions. They don't want to they don't want their imaginations to obscure the view, so they always come up with endless questions. One day, I think Gauri Devidasi, she was an expert and she artist, and her canvases were given to Prabhupada, and he said they look good, but one of the expert artists found some faults in it. But Prabhupada said the blind uncle is better than no uncle, and he said the readers will be happy, so that's fine.
Thank you. We read a lot. Ranath Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Okay. Blind uncle. I start from Srila Prabhupada freely gave, Prabhu? I thought we read that.
I think the artist, right? Present the artist had their usual question, no?
I thought even, sorry.
And that was done, and the next one is also done.
Yeah, blind uncle is better than none.
Is it done? Okay.
Yes.
Due to Srila Prabhupada's presence in Los Angeles, I thought we read this also.
Yeah, that's okay. She didn't summarize this, so you can continue.
Okay. Due to Srila Prabhupada's presence in Los Angeles, the book production marathon intensified. Even without attending Prabhupada's morning walks or classes or evening readings in the garden, the press workers felt ecstasy. All day they worked at what Prabhupada wanted most. And to take time off to go see him, they reasoned would be selfish. Giving all their energy for Krishna, they felt blissful. The press was busy day and night. To see devotees slumped over their desks or typewriters or lying beside their easels at 2 or 3 in the morning was not unusual. Proofreaders saw manuscripts come into and out of their hands so quickly they could hardly bear it. An artist might fall asleep before an uncompleted painting and awaken to find it being finished at another artist's easel. Rameshwara, running on very little sleep, orchestrated everything, including the photographer in India, the printer, and the paper company. Sometimes he would work directly with Radha Vallabha on various aspects of the production. Radha Vallabha had set the deadlines and he kept to them at all costs. To the press workers, he seemed to be present everywhere, encouraging them, bringing them supplies, seeing to their needs, begging and coercing them to complete their quotas. But one night he took a break and entered Prabhupada's room during an informal gathering of devotees. Prabhupada, his eyes closed, his head gently rocking, was listening to a tape of himself singing bhajanas. Opening his eyes and seeing Radha Vallabha seated among the others, he said, I am keeping you, and again closed his eyes. One of the devotees spoke up and said, Oh no, no, Prabhupada, you're not bothering us. But another devotee turned to Radha Vallabha and said, I think Prabhupada was talking to you. Radha Vallabha realized what Prabhupada meant. He was telling him to go back to work. It was as if Prabhupada were actually saying, Why are you sitting here looking at me? Get back to work. Srila Prabhupada was pleased with the sincerity of his disciples. 17 books in 2 months he had asked them to produce, and they, rather than try to explain to him why this was impossible, had taken the orders so seriously that they could not conceive of rejecting or changing or modifying it. Instead of modifying the order, they had modified their lives. They had gone beyond the realm of routine work into the realm of extraordinary effort. As a result, both they and Prabhupada felt great satisfaction. As Prabhupada said, it was all an arrangement for the satisfaction of Lord Chaitanya and the previous acharyas. Srila Prabhupada decided to continue his US tour, visiting Laguna Beach and San Diego, and then going on to Dallas. From there, he would visit New Orleans and the nearby ISKCON farm in Mississippi, then on to Detroit, Toronto, Boston, and New York, eventually traveling to Europe and India. Should I stop, Prabhu? Yeah, yeah. So, devotees did not attend any of Prabhupada's morning walk or classes or evening readings. Um, uh, they were, so busy and they intensified the marathon, book production marathon, because Prabhupada was physically present in Los Angeles. But even though they didn't attend any of this, they felt ecstasy and instead of going seeing him, which they thought was felt selfish, they were working on what Prabhupada wanted most, producing those books and giving all their energy for Krishna. They felt very blissful. And so the press was busy day and night. Uh, all the devotees were, their desks, typewriters lying beside, doing, until 2 or 3 in the morning. Uh, it became a routine activity for them, and proofreaders, saw these manuscripts coming in and out of their hands so quickly, and one devotee or one artist may start working and it was too late, maybe fall asleep, and then find it that somebody else took care of it. And Rameshwara also was sleeping very little, and who orchestrated everything, including the photographer in India, the printer, and the paper company. And he also sometimes worked directly with Radha Vallabha on various aspects of the production. And Radha Vallabha was the one who committed to these, set these deadlines, and kept all of them. And he was present everywhere, encouraging, bringing all the supplies, making sure their needs were all met, sometimes begging them, sometimes forcing them to complete their quotas. But one night, he apparently took a break and entered Prabhupada's room, where some devotees gathered informally, and Prabhupada had his eyes closed, rocking his head gently and listening to a tape of his bhajans. And once he opened his eyes to see Radha Vallabha seated among the other devotees, and said, "I'm keeping you." And again closed his eyes, and and one of the devotees spoke up and said, "Oh, no, no, Prabhupada, you're not bothering us." And then another devotee said Prabhupada to Radha Vallabha that Prabhupada was talking to him, and Radha Vallabha realized that it was Prabhupada telling him to go back to work rather than just sitting there and looking at him. And Prabhupada was, no, I think we stopped there. Oh yeah, we read this paragraph. Yeah. So Prabhupada was pleased with the sincerity of his disciples, and 17 books in 2 months he asked them to produce. And rather than giving excuses or telling him why it was impossible, they took the order seriously, and they had no thoughts of either changing or rejecting or modifying the goal, and they just adjusted or modified their lives to suit to meet the goals. And they, they went really beyond routine work, working extra hours, putting a lot of extra effort. And at the end, both Prabhupada and the devotees felt great satisfaction. And Prabhupada said it was all an arrangement for pleasing Lord Chaitanya and the previous acharyas. Thank you.
You covered the, okay.
Prabhupada decided to continue his US tour, went to Laguna Beach, San Diego, then went to Dallas, then he visited New Orleans, and then the ISKCON farm in Mississippi. Then he also went on to Detroit, Toronto, Boston, and New York, and then wrapping up his trip, traveling to Europe and then to India. Yeah, I stopped there. Yeah, thank you.
Nipa, please do.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. From Prabhupada's point of view, his touring was imperative for spreading Krishna consciousness. As he had said in his arrival address at Berkeley, I am traveling all over the world twice, thrice in a year. My duty is to see that my disciples who have accepted me as Guru may not fall down. That is my anxiety. Prabhupada's concern was for his disciples, but also for all people distressed by the fallen and ignorant state of humanity, especially in the West. He wanted to help the English speaking world, as his spiritual master had ordered. This had been his spirit 2 years ago in Calcutta, when he had risen from a sick bed and flown to London to take part in the Rath Yatra. This was his great desire to preach in the West, where people were so strongly under the grip of speculative philosophies, denying God and glorifying sense enjoyment. The mass of people would not easily change their ignorant ways, but but if he could make only one person a pure devotee, he said then his work would be successful. Prabhupada would work intensively with his important India projects for a few months, but then would always return to the West to again tour and preach. Both were required, developing his projects in India and touring the West. When Yogi Bhajan and company in Berkeley had expressed his amazement how Prabhupada was personally maintaining his disciples by traveling all over the world, Prabhupada had admitted that it was difficult and that he was trying to train his GBC secretaries to lead his movement. But so far it seemed that as long as he had the power to do so, he would continue to travel. Prabhu, shall I continue? Laguna Beach, July 25th, 1975. Laguna Beach was about 2 hours drive south of Los Angeles. The temple, a house near the beach, was crowded with guests and visiting devotees. After Prabhupada had taken his seat upon the newly upholstered Vyas Asana, some of the temple leaders came forward one at a time and bathed his feet. In the course of his lecture, Prabhupada spoke against taking intoxicating drugs. Is there anyone here who can say, I am the controller? Is there anyone who will answer this? You may think that you are the controller, but you are controlled by drugs. The city of Laguna Beach was notorious as an illicit drug center. Prabhupada had come not to flatter anyone with sentimental spirituality, but to cut through their illusion. Bathing the feet of their spiritual master was good, but to be a genuine devotee, one had to strictly follow the regulations. One had to choose whether to be controlled by drugs or by Krishna. Prabhupada stayed next door to the temple in a neighbor's house. His first visitor was Rishi Dasa, who had given up his initiation vows and fallen away from Krishna consciousness. Sporting long curly hair and a beard, he had casually dropped by to pay a little visit to his former spiritual master. Prabhupada received Rishi warmly, and they both exchanged smile and laughed. Rishi's demeanor, however, was brazen, almost defiant, and he showed no contrition. Prabhupada was not very happy to see the state of this boy to whom he had awarded the sannyasa order a few years before. So Srila Prabhupada continued to tour to spread Krishna consciousness, and he said in his arrival, Laguna Beach, that's the point. Srila Prabhupada decided to continue his US tour, visiting Laguna Beach and San Diego, then going to Dallas. He would visit New Orleans and nearby Escon Farm in Mississippi, and then to Detroit, Toronto, Boston, oh, that is country, and New York, eventually to Europe and India. Prabhupada's point of view, from his point of view, he was spreading Krishna consciousness. And as he said in his arrival address, that I'm traveling all over the world twice, thrice in a year. And my duty is to see that my disciples who have accepted me as Guru may not fall down. This was my anxiety. Prabhupada's concern was for his disciples, and um, they were distressed by fallen and ignorant state of humanity in the West, which existed for the English-speaking world. His spiritual master had ordered. So this had been 2 years ago in Calcutta that he was rising from the sick bed and then had gone to London to take part in Rath Yatra, and this was his great desire to preach in the West, where people were under the grip of speculative philosophies, and they were denying the existence of God and glorifying sense enjoyment. And the mass of the people in the West would not change easily their ignorant ways and become a pure devotee. And he said that this work that he could, if only one person, a pure devotee, he can make, then his work would be easy and successful. Prabhupada had taken intensively with the important projects for a few months ago in India, and then always returned to the West also to tour and preach. But both were required, like developing projects in India and touring West was both a necessity. When Yogi Bhajan and company in Berkeley expressed that how Prabhupada was maintaining his disciples by traveling all over the world, they were amazed how he was doing it. And Prabhupada had expressed that it was difficult, but he was trying to train GBC secretaries to lead this movement. And so long as he had the power to do so, he will continue to travel and do the same. Laguna Beach, July 25th, 1975. Was Laguna Beach was about 2 hour drive from Los Angeles, south of Los Angeles, and there was a house near the beach which was crowded with guests and visiting devotees, the temple. And after Prabhupada had taken his seat upon the new upholstered Vyasna, some of the leaders came forward and they bathed his feet. And in that course of his lecture, Prabhupada spoke about drugs, intoxicating drugs. And he's asking the question like, is there anyone who can say he's the controller? Is there anyone who will answer this? That you are the controller, but in a reality you are controlled by drugs. The city of Laguna Beach was like surrounded with it was like an illicit drug center, and Prabhupada had not come here to flatter with the sentimental spirituality, but to cut through their illusion. And bathing the feet of spiritual master was good, but like it was one had to do that strictly follow the regulations as well as a genuine devotee. One has to choose whether to be controlled by drugs or whether he should be controlled by Krishna. Prabhupada stayed in next door in a neighbor's house, and his first visitor over there was Rishi Dasa. Rishi Dasa was had once upon given his initiation vows and fallen away from Krishna consciousness, and he had sporting long curly hair and a beard, and he casually dropped to pay visit to Prabhupada, and Prabhupada received him very warmly. But Prabhupada was like, not very happy to see him in the state where he had awarded the sannyasa order a few years ago, and he looked like brazen, almost defiant, and no contrition.
Yes, thank you. Hope you're doing well, Nipa. We didn't hear you yesterday.
Yes, Prabhu, I'm fine.
Okay, yeah. Let us know if really, anything, any issues, if we can try whatever we can.
Yes, Prabhu, definitely.
I know a little time, but we will try our best to arrange for you something if needed, okay? I was thinking to have a get together for our Lilamrita reading group sometimes. I don't know where, but it's nice we all had read together. So AJ, maybe you can finish in a couple of paragraphs.
Sure. In earlier years, Prabhupada had cried when a dear disciple had left him. In those days, the fall of a disciple had been rare, almost unheard of. But over the years, Prabhupada had seen more casualties, even among his GBC leaders and sannyasis. In 1967, when one of his first disciples, Krishna Devidasi, had left her husband, Subal, and gone off with a boyfriend, Prabhupada had consoled Subal by reminding him how rare it was that one could become a devotee of Krishna. The wonderful thing is not that Krishna Dasi has left, Srila Prabhupada had said, but that we can stay in Krishna consciousness. Although devotees left Krishna consciousness for various reasons, Srila Prabhupada saw them all as having been tricked by illusion. The result was almost always the same, whether the defector left on the plea of a new religion or new economic opportunity or whatever. Usually he or she would take up a life of sense gratification, abandoning the strict path of self-realization. This was certainly true of, was it Rishi? When Prabhupada asked him what he was doing with his life, he laughed and said he was playing saxophone. There was no need to ask him whether he was chanting 16 rounds or following the four rules, but Rishi wanted to assure Srila Prabhupada that he was doing fine. I think I have more freedom now, said Rishi. Do you think you have freedom? Prabhupada challenged. Some, Rishi replied, by studying and working. What is your age? Prabhupada asked. 29. Are you free not to become older? Srila Prabhupada persisted. No. Then what is your freedom? Rishi gave a short laugh. I don't care. That's all right, Prabhupada replied, but I am researching. I am now 78, and I don't wish to die, but I am forced. But you too are forced to become old. No one wants to be old. Recalling some of the Krishna conscious philosophy, Rishi tried to argue against Prabhupada, saying that although he was forced to grow old, according to transmigration of the soul, he would be free after death, and anyway, there were other freedoms. There you go. I'll read that last one there. Prabhupada stuck to his original point and said, death is inevitable. Old age, no one wants. Everyone wants youth. Even an old man goes to the beach for health. I want youth, but I cannot have it. So where's the freedom? So they're talking about how, occasionally a devotee would leave, one of the disciples would leave, and at first, Prabhupada, would be, upset about it. He would be in tears over it. But as time went on, and it was rare in the early days, but over time, he saw more and more, people leave Krishna consciousness, even amongst the higher ups in ISKCON, the GBC leaders and some of the sannyasis. Then it talks about how when Krishna Devi Dasi left her husband, Subal, to go off with another guy, Prabhupada said, hey, you know what? It's like, this stinks, obviously, but how rare is it that, you could become a devotee of Krishna? Like, that's something special. He's like, the wonderful thing is not that she's left, but that even though she's gone, you're still, you're still staying in Krishna consciousness. And that's the good thing. And people would leave for different reasons, but Prabhupada's take was that they're just being lured back into illusion, lured by Maya, and it was always the same. If they left for new religion or for money or whatever, they would take up, they'd forget the regulative principles and lead back to a life of sense gratification. So Prabhupada is talking, and I say that, is it Rishi? RSI? Is it Rishi?
Yeah, Rishi.
Yeah, Rishi. So when Prabhupada, encounters Rishi, who was a disciple, and he said, what are you doing? And he goes, I'm playing saxophone. And Prabhupada's like, all right, well, if you're doing that, you're definitely not following your the four regulative principles or chanting your rounds. And he says, Prabhupada, he's like, I think I have more freedom now. Prabhupada says, oh, you think you have freedom? Like, and he's like, well, yeah, I'm studying and working. He goes, how old are you? And Rishi goes, I'm 29. He says, oh, so you have freedom. You're not going to grow old now. That's what, and Prabhupada goes, no, then what's your freedom? And he's like, I don't care. But he says, Prabhupada goes, well, you know what? I'm just trying to figure this out, right? I'm 78. I don't want to die, but I'm gonna. And you're gonna die, right? You're forced to grow old too. And Rishi tries to say, well, you know what? There's nothing wrong with dying. I'll be free after I die. And, because of, the soul moves from body to body. And on top of that, there's other freedoms that I had. Prabhupada comes back and says, look, man, death is inevitable. Old age is inevitable. Everyone wants to be young. Even even I go to the beach for my health, but he's like, I want youth and I can't have it. So where's freedom? What's this freedom you talk about? So.
Very nice. Very, very grateful. Thank you so much. We'll continue where we left today. Hare Krishna. Shri Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.